Humble woman takes her son to an engagement party and is shocked when he calls the millionaire groom Dad. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. A soft drizzle glimmered against the towering glass walls of New York's most luxurious hotel, where the buzz of an extravagant engagement party pulsed beneath elegant chandeliers. This was the talk of the city, an event to celebrate the upcoming marriage of Jared Hamilton, billionaire real estate magnate, high society luminary, and boardroom legend, to the glamorous Emma Lawrence, a refined socialite with an impeccable pedigree. Chauffeured cars queued outside, delivering guests in designer gowns and tailored suits, each stepping onto the plush red carpet with hushed excitement. No one, not a single person, predicted that the real showstopper wouldn't be Jared's triumphant entrance but the quiet arrival of a single mother and her curly-haired 6-year-old boy, an entrance that would unravel secrets, ignite family feuds, and alter the Hamilton family forever. Sophie Carter clutched her purse with a trembling hand as she stepped into the marbled lobby. Her heart fluttered erratically, torn between dread and determination. A swirl of floral arrangements and polished silver trays set the backdrop for an occasion meant to be perfect. Yet Sophie's mind raced with memories of what once was and the unresolved questions that brought her here tonight. "Mommy," little Oliver piped up, tugging at Sophie's coat. "Is this where the party is?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sophie murmured, her voice tight. "Let's just be careful." Oliver scrunched his nose, gazing wide-eyed at the gleaming decor. He looked undeniably out of place in the hush of wealth, his little sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, his eyes darting from the imposing security guards to the elegantly dressed guests drifting through the hall. Sophie, wearing a simple navy dress that had seen more than a few rehemmings, felt the cool stares of curiosity brush against her shoulders. Even so, she squared them, refusing to lower her gaze. She had received the engraved invitation by mistake, or perhaps by fate. Her old mailing address was still on record with a charity Emma co-chaired, and suddenly there it was, that swirl of gold script proclaiming a sumptuous engagement party for Jared Hamilton and Emma Lawrence. For 4 years, Sophie had tried to conceal every whisper of her past, forging ahead in a new city, adopting a modest existence. But Oliver's big hazel eyes, mirror images of someone else's, were a daily reminder of the truth Sophie had stifled. Perhaps it was madness that urged her to attend tonight. Or maybe it was a mother's determination to provide answers for a child who asked, day in and day out, "Do I have a daddy?" Sophie herself had not been sure if Jared would even remember her. After all, 4 years was a long time. Life had drastically changed for them both, or so it appeared. In the ballroom, sumptuous floral arches framed a table overflowing with French pastries and champagne flutes. Crystalline chandeliers dripped from the vaulted ceiling, reflecting thousands of brilliant sparks like a galaxy turned upside down. Emma Lawrence, luminous in an ivory couture gown, stood near the stage, greeting well-wishers. She was the embodiment of sophistication, slender, tall, her every movement as orchestrated as a performance. Across the crowd, Jared Hamilton spoke with his father, Walter Hamilton, a looming figure even at 70, with impeccable white hair and a posture that oozed old money authority. Jared was in a sleek black suit that fit him perfectly, exuding the understated confidence of a man accustomed to success. His dark hair, neatly combed, failed to mask a certain restlessness in his expression. People said Jared was unstoppable, acquiring prime properties across Manhattan, finalizing deals that soared across headlines, earning accolades as the city's most eligible bachelor. Until now. Sophie drew a trembling breath. The last she saw him, they were both dreamers in a far smaller world. Back then, Jared wasn't the billionaire scion, but a hard-working entrepreneur forging his path with unstoppable drive. Their romance had been short but scorching, a a private world of late-night confessions and stolen kisses. Then, one morning, he was gone. Disappeared without a final goodbye, leaving her with fleeting memories, and a child who bore his eyes. She edged closer to a cluster of guests, her heels tapping lightly. Oliver gazed in awe at the spiral of rose-petal centerpieces. Determined not to disturb the evening's illusions, Sophie planned to stay just long enough to catch Jared's attention. Maybe she'd whisper a few words, something about wanting Oliver to know his father's face, if not more. Then, quietly, she would leave. It was foolish, maybe even reckless, but a child had the right to understand where he came from. But children rarely follow their parents' scripts. In a lightning-swift moment, Oliver spotted Jared from across the hall. Without warning, the boy slipped from Sophie's grip. Weaving past tuxedoed servers and society guests, he sped toward the tall, confident man who was mid-conversation with Emma's father. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't cross the distance fast enough. She heard her own voice lodge in panic at the back of her tongue, trying to call Oliver's name, but she was too late. Oliver reached Jared, extended his small hand, and said the unthinkable, the word that dropped like a thunderclap in the center of that refined crowd. "Dad?" The entire room froze, as if someone had abruptly stopped the music. Emma's delicate laughter died on her lips. Jared turned, confusion etched on his face, scanning for the mother who might have coaxed the child. The swirl of conversations, the tinkling of champagne glasses, the orchestrated mood of celebration, everything spiraled into absolute hush. Oliver's eyes shone with an innocent curiosity, the kind that only a child too young to comprehend adult dilemmas might carry. "Dad?" he repeated, quieter now. I think you're my dad." Time seemed suspended. Jared blinked, his mind struggling to bridge the dissonance. 100 subtle signals ignited, the shape of Oliver's jaw, the gentle arch of his brow, even a certain tilt to his chin. The child was undeniably Hamilton's stock. The resemblance was as stark as a reflection in glass. Walter Hamilton's face soured in shock and immediate disapproval. Emma stepped forward, shaking her head slightly as though trying to make sense of the child's words. Elite guests craned their necks, hush spreading like a ripple. The only sound was the subdued hum of the overhead lights. Then Sophie burst forward, breath ragged, grabbing Oliver's shoulders. She could feel the eyes of the entire party pinned upon her. She saw Jared's expression shift from perplexity to something akin to recognition, and maybe even heartbreak. "I'm so sorry," Sophie said, voice trembling yet thick with emotion. She attempted a stable smile, but tears threatened to surface. "Oliver, sweetheart, you can't—" But Oliver clung to Jared's pant leg, gazing up, refusing to let go of that singular notion. To a child it seemed so clear. This man was the father he'd pictured when he looked in the mirror, searching for similarities. As the silence weighed down the grand ballroom, Jared inhaled. The swirl of memories assaulted him. An old motel room, the whispered confessions, the day he left abruptly for a business emergency, never to return. Sophie Carter, the woman he'd once cherished for reasons he couldn't entirely name. She was right here, in the flesh, eyes full of quiet torment. And the boy was his. The swirl of cameras and cell phones began their restless shuffle. This spectacle was too delicious for the curious onlookers to ignore. Emma's father scowled, stepping protectively beside his daughter. Walter Hamilton's stiff shoulders told the entire story. Hamilton men do not appreciate humiliation in front of high society. This child, this mother, were not part of the plan. Sophie swallowed. She could practically feel the pressure mounting. She tried to speak, but the floodgates had opened. Emma stepped forward, her voice dangerously calm. "Who is this child? And why on earth would he call my fiancé Dad?" Sophie opened her mouth to answer, but ironically it was Jared who found his voice first. Quiet, Yet unmistakably firm, he said, "Emma, I need to speak with Sophie. Alone." His eyes flicked toward Oliver, or rather toward the echo of himself in that small face. A wave of guilt, confusion, and an almost staggering protectiveness flickered across Jared's features. Meanwhile, Emma, her father, and the throng of well-heeled guests stared in stunned silence. The hushed intensity threatened to quake the room into chaos, and in Oliver's bright eyes there was nothing but pure, simple hope. At that moment, Sophie realized everything had changed. The illusions she had clung to for 6 years, of secrecy, of not disturbing Jared's gilded world, of insulating Oliver from the heartbreak that might come, shattered amidst the glow of crystal chandeliers. The path ahead held only confrontations, with Jared, with Emma, with the entire Hamilton legacy that overshadowed them all. But one question dwarfed even the swirl of gossip and shock. Would Jared Hamilton, newly engaged billionaire, step up to be the father this child deserved? Or would he unravel all over again, leaving Sophie and Oliver to bear the weight of heartbreak for a second time? For a beat, no one moved. Across the plush carpet and candle-lit glow of the ballroom, tension sizzled like a live wire. Sophie could taste her own heartbeat, a thud of terror and tentative relief that finally the truth was known. She felt Oliver's small hand trembling in hers as Jared's gaze latched onto them, as though years were collapsing into this single moment. Emma bristled, her composure tested in a way she was wholly unaccustomed to. Society cameras once aimed at her shimmering white dress and the celebratory decor now pivoted to catch every subtle shift on her face. Her father, Robert Lawrence, who had earlier been boasting about an upcoming philanthropic venture, folded his arms in disapproval. He'd helped arrange this wedding, steering Emma toward Jared for the promise of heightened family prestige. A scandal like this, an unknown child, was everything he loathed. Walter Hamilton, imposing and stately, cleared his throat. "Jared, might we get an explanation?" His measured voice almost cracked under the strain of suppressed anger. His eyes flicked over Sophie, then Oliver. "You assured me all your personal matters were handled." Jared exhaled as if slapped, only to steady himself. "There's no explanation that belongs in front of 200 guests," he finally said, words taut. He turned to Emma, who clutched the edge of a nearby table for support. "Emma, I promise I'll—" "You promise you'll what?" Emma demanded, her voice low and sharp. Fury masked the heartbreak creeping into her eyes. "Explain? Apologize? This is humiliating. Do you have any idea what this looks like?" Sophie, stepping into the tangle of anger and confusion, gently urged Oliver behind her. "I didn't come to ruin your party," she said softly, though her voice carried through the hush. I tried to—" But no one seemed inclined to let her finish. Onlookers, parted around them like a fence of silhouettes, whispered behind jeweled clutches and phone screens. The press, alerted by any whiff of Hamilton drama, angled themselves to catch it all. "Let's move this into a private room," suggested an event planner, an anxious man with a cordless microphone pinned to his lapel. He was clearly desperate to salvage the evening's veneer. "Perhaps we can invite Ms. Carter?" Sophie stiffened at the sound of her name on someone else's lips. It meant they'd already identified her, or at least gleaned enough from old gossip columns. The swirl of stares sharpened. Her face burned as she realized that soon enough the entire city might brand her an opportunist, someone who crashed an engagement party hoping for a chunk of Hamilton fortune. Jared stepped forward, and Sophie prepared herself for an immediate rebuke. It still felt unreal that they were less than a foot apart now. She'd rehearsed so many speeches, so many possible encounters, and none had ever matched this. She dreaded the possibility that he'd turn on her with the same cold indifference he had once before. But to her surprise, Jared's voice was low, almost gentle. "Let's talk somewhere else," he echoed, ignoring the menacing flicker in Walter's eyes and Emma's wounded glare. "Please." He guided Sophie and Oliver out of the ballroom, flanked by 2 security guards who parted the crowd. Despite the swirl of hushed commentary, guests stepped aside. Emma followed a few paces behind, posture rigid, perhaps unwilling to let Jared vanish with Sophie unchaperoned. The hallway leading to a side lounge was blessedly quieter. Its decor was just as extravagant: gilded mirrors, lush plants standing in porcelain vases, walls draped in navy velvet. But at least it afforded them a measure of privacy away from the paparazzi-like stares. Before anyone spoke, Oliver piped up again, his voice small. "Daddy?" Jared flinched, so subtle but Sophie noticed. She herself ached to draw Oliver close, to hush him, as if somehow she could protect him from what might unfold. But Oliver's innocent question cut right through the adult politics. He simply wanted a father. Emma inhaled sharply. "What are we dealing with here?" She aimed the question at Jared, but her gaze flicked over Sophie, disbelief and suspicion warring in her eyes. "Have you known about this child?" "I never told him," Sophie said quietly. "He didn't know. I left the city 4 years ago. She paused, feeling Jared's stare. "We lost touch." There was a faint dryness in Jared's laugh, more of an exhale than true amusement. "Lost touch? You disappeared, Sophie. Vanished. Nobody could tell me where you'd gone." Sophie's jaw tightened. That wasn't how she recalled it. "When I tried to call you," she whispered, voice trembling, "some assistant told me you'd moved abroad, that you weren't coming back." She exhaled, feeling the wave of anger that had fueled her lonely nights. I had no resources, no time to chase a man who had all but ghosted me. So you assumed I chose to abandon you." Jared's voice sounded pained. "But you never tried to contact me again? Not even once?" "Sophie, I didn't—" He stopped himself, uncertain how much to reveal with Emma right beside him, arms folded. He couldn't deny that business had exploded, that he'd traveled fiercely to finalize global deals, but that didn't excuse that final break, those months of utter silence. "Stop!" Emma interjected, her patience fraying. "None of this clarifies the question. Is this boy your son, or is this a stunt?" She shot Sophie a scathing look, as if the simple navy dress and worn shoes exposed Sophie's meager finances and potential motives. "I'd like to know the truth," Oliver wriggled in Sophie's grip, eyeing Jared. "He looks like me," he said with quiet wonder. At that, Jared did the strangest thing. He crouched so that he was at Oliver's eye level. He looked at the child's soft brown curls, the faint dimple in his cheek, even the shape of his nose. It was like glimpsing an echo of his own reflection from decades ago. A tremor passed through him, an awakening. He whispered, "What's your name, buddy?" "Oliver Carter," the boy answered, voice pitched with that unwavering frankness only children possess. Then he reached out and lightly touched Jared's suit lapel. "Are you really my dad?" Sophie swallowed hard, emotion brimming in her eyes. She felt the retort waiting on Emma's lips. She saw the flicker of rage on the older woman's face. But right now, all that mattered was the raw humanity in Jared's gaze. Jared took a few seconds to steady himself before he replied, It looks like I might be, Oliver." His tone was gentle, heartbreakingly so, and it made Sophie's throat constrict. "But we need a test and some conversations. Grown-up stuff." He paused, clearing his throat. "I didn't know about you, or I would have come for you a long time ago." There was sincerity in his words, the ring of truth that Sophie recognized from long ago, when he'd promised her that his feelings were real. Back when they were just 2 people in a cramped walk-up apartment, dreaming of futures that might not come. She felt a maddening rush of conflicting emotions, anger for the heartache she'd endured, relief that he seemed to care, fear of letting her guard down. From behind them, Emma let out a brittle laugh. "What a pretty picture. You want me to believe you had no idea you fathered a child." Or that you're so naive you never realized Sophie was pregnant?" Emma's voice wavered, though her expression was steely. "Jared, how could you not sense—" "Emma," Jared said, standing again. There was a quaver in his tone, overshadowed by an attempt to remain composed. "I didn't know. You have every right to be upset, but—" "Upset? That doesn't even begin to cover it." Her eyes shone, and for a moment, Sophie glimpsed real hurt behind her tough facade. "We're on the brink of marriage. You promised me there were no lingering complications, no secret children, no old flames. And now this child arrives, calling you dad in the middle of our engagement party. I'm supposed to keep my chin up and feign civility?" Walter Hamilton and Robert Lawrence loomed at the far end of the corridor, each taking measured steps closer. Sophie felt her spine tingle. She had no illusions that these men were about to warmly embrace her or her son. They represented the old guard, the watchful gatekeepers of generational wealth and influence. "You," Walter said, ignoring even Jared for the moment, focusing on Sophie with almost chilling calm. "Whatever your motive, Miss Carter, I recommend you proceed very carefully. I will protect my son and our family from exploitation." Sophie bristled. "Oliver is Jared's flesh and blood," she murmured, her voice trembling with quiet fierceness. "We're not here for money or any scheme. He's a little boy who wanted to see his father's face." Walter's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Jared's face reflected conflict. He had grown up under Walter's iron rule, always living up to Hamilton standards. But facing Sophie now, facing Oliver, something deeper pulled at him, something paternal. Emma's father, Robert, exhaled as though weary of the entire drama. "We can't stand in a hallway trading accusations. Let's at least do this behind closed doors. I suggest we meet in the private lounge. The guests can remain in the ballroom so the event doesn't implode. There's no need for a bigger scandal than we already have." "Or," Emma snapped, "maybe we should just let the tabloids run wild, because that's what's going to happen anyway." Jared turned to Sophie, expression torn. "Sophie, can we finish this conversation quietly?" His eyes flicked to Oliver. "I want to talk properly, but maybe Oliver could wait in a calmer place. We can set him up with something to keep him occupied." Sophie blinked, uncertain. She didn't trust Emma or the others not to lash out. But Oliver's presence was complicating matters that adults needed to navigate alone. The child's brow furrowed, sensing the tension. At last, Sophie gave a small nod. "All right, but I'm staying with him, or very close by." She turned to Oliver. "How about we find a cozy spot where you can draw for a bit, sweetheart?" Oliver hesitated, peering up at Jared. Then he nodded. "Okay, Mom." Their agreement, as fraught and uneasy as it was, offered the only immediate solution. They would retreat to a more private space. Meanwhile, beyond the hallway's heavy drapes, the buzz of rumor and speculation brewed among Manhattan's elite like a storm on the horizon. Sophie could almost hear the whispering carry through the corridors. The Hamilton heir has an illegitimate child. Emma Lawrence's perfect engagement is in jeopardy. Who is this Sophie Carter, and how on earth did she vanish for 4 years without Jared's knowledge? No matter how the conversation behind closed doors went, Sophie sensed their worlds had cracked wide open. For Oliver's sake, she had to steel herself for the battle that might follow. If Jared truly wanted to be part of Oliver's life, they would have to unify in some form. But the obstacles, Emma, Walter, society's gossip, and the wounds from the past, loomed like wolves in the dark. With hearts pounding and 1,000 questions swirling, they moved as one uneasy group toward the private lounge. Nothing about it felt like a resolution. It felt rather like the beginning of a test that would push them all to reveal who they truly were, once the facade of wealth and polite society peeled away. The private lounge was meant for small VIP gatherings, a suite of rooms with plush armchairs, gilded side tables, and decorative crystal lamps casting a subdued glow. Tonight, it became the stage for a confrontation that could reshape countless lives. The moment Sophie, Oliver, and Jared entered, followed closely by Emma, Walter, and Robert Lawrence, an uneasy hush settled. Even the security guards stationed discreetly near the door seemed to sense that the tension had reached fever pitch. Oliver clung to Sophie's hand, the newness of all this grandeur both dazzling and frightening. Sophie's heart twisted seeing him so vulnerable. She inhaled deeply, reminding herself that everything she was doing, facing these powerful people, dredging up old wounds, was for her son. Whether or not Jared ultimately stepped up, she had to at least give Oliver the chance to know his father. Emma stood at the center of the lounge, one arm folded across her chest, the other pressing at her temple as though warding off a migraine. In the corner, Robert Lawrence's phone buzzed sporadically, and he silenced it each time with a clipped motion, no doubt more queries from outside about the fiasco unfolding. Walter Hamilton looked as though he'd aged a decade in the last hour, standing grimly, arms behind his back. Jared steered Sophie toward a separate sitting area off to one side, away from Emma's line of sight, and, gesturing toward a low table, offered for Oliver to sit. An attendant hovered by the door, waiting on instructions. "Bring him some juice," Jared said softly, flashing an uncertain smile in Oliver's direction. "Maybe. Milk and cookies if you have it." He glanced at Sophie, who nodded appreciatively, though her lips were pressed tight. Oliver sank onto the cushioned armchair. His eyes flitted around the lavish decor. Even though his presence had caused all this upheaval, he was still just a 6-year-old boy entranced by the swirl of new sensations. The lounge's thick carpet muffled footsteps, and the hush gave every voice an eerie clarity. Emma's heeled shoes clicked forcefully as she advanced. "We're not here for refreshments," she snapped. Then her gaze landed on Oliver, and she exhaled, modulating her tone so as not to frighten him. "But we need clarity. Now." Jared hesitated, then motioned to one of the staff. "Could you help Ms. Carter's son find a quieter spot just behind that partition?" He looked at Sophie. "We'll keep him close. He doesn't need to hear all the details." Sophie nodded, tension coiling in her stomach. She kneeled beside Oliver. "Sweetheart, we'll be right here. If you get nervous, just come to me, all right?" Oliver looked unconvinced but nodded, allowing the staffer to lead him a few steps away, behind a tall folding screen near the sofa. He'd still be visible if Sophie leaned a bit, but hopefully shielded enough from the adult standoff. The moment Oliver was semi-out of earshot, voices rose in overlap. "I want to know how you ended up pregnant and apparently never contacted my son," Walter accused, stepping forward with an imperious glare at Sophie. "Did you think to trap him? Or was there some misunderstanding?" Sophie's skin prickled. "I tried contacting Jared," she said, voice calm but laced with old resentment. "He was unreachable. Eventually I had to accept it was over, that he must have known and chosen not to come back. I assumed," she added, shifting her gaze to Jared, "that you'd moved on." Jared combed a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I didn't move on. My expansion deals took me overseas for months at a time, and I never received a single message from you. If I had, Wait," Emma interjected, clearly struggling to keep her composure. She looked at Sophie. "You claim you couldn't contact him. Did you not know he has a global corporation, press coverage, offices in half a dozen countries? Are we supposed to believe you couldn't leave a note or find a publicist or—" Emma let the question dangle, the insinuation being that Sophie either did this intentionally or had something to hide. Sophie's jaw tightened. She'd heard it before, wealthy people thinking everything was so easy if you just tried. "No matter how it happened," Robert Lawrence said, stepping between them in the small circle, "the question now is what you want. Miss Carter, is it?" He shot Sophie an expectant look. Sophie took a steadying breath. "What I want is for Oliver to know who his father is. Nothing more. I didn't come here to blackmail Jared or to sabotage this engagement. But—" She glanced at Jared, her eyes unexpectedly moist. "I couldn't look my son in the eyes anymore and pretend I didn't know how to find you. He's been asking about his dad for years." "That's it?" Walter asked, eyes narrowing. "You burst in on an engagement party just to introduce him?" "I got the invitation by mistake," Sophie replied. "I knew Emma's name from certain charity mailers, but I had no clue she and Jared were involved. Once I realized—" Her voice trembled. "Yes, I thought perhaps it was destiny, a sign that it was time to end the secret." Emma let out a bitter laugh. Destiny? How quaint. Across the room, Jared leaned back against the wall as though grappling with the swirl of revelations. "Let's stop blaming each other for a moment," he managed, his tone forcibly calm. "What matters most is Oliver. If he is my son—" He paused, the weight of that phrase overwhelming. "We need to confirm paternity and decide how to move forward. It's not about what you want or I want anymore, it's about him." Walter cleared his throat. "That's prudent. A DNA test, done discreetly. We can get it expedited and have results soon. If indeed he's a Hamilton, we'll handle it from there." His gaze flicked toward Emma, who pressed her lips together, uncertain. "And if the child is yours, Jared?" Emma ventured, voice shaking just enough to betray her fear. "What happens to our wedding? To everything we've built? Are you expecting me to just smile for the cameras, act like this is no big deal?" She gestured at Sophie with undisguised resentment. "Because it is a big deal." Jared stepped toward Emma, tone softening. "I know, I'm sorry. This is not how I imagined telling you or discovering any of it. But Emma, it's not Oliver's fault. I won't punish him because of some gap in communication from years ago." Emma's eyes brimmed with tears she refused to shed. "So we just pivot? Make nice in front of the media and accept an illegitimate child into our perfect family image?" Sophie winced at the word illegitimate, but she held her tongue. None of this was about her pride. She only cared that Oliver be acknowledged and, she hoped, treated kindly. Robert Lawrence sighed, gesturing for Emma to step aside. They moved a few feet away, conferring in hushed tones. Walter joined, forming a triangle of stony-faced older generation. Jared looked at Sophie, 1,000 unsaid words lingering in the space between them. "I truly never knew," he said, voice low enough not to carry. "I swear it. If I had—" He trailed off, seemingly overwhelmed by the immensity of "if only." Sophie nodded. "I believe you," she murmured. She studied his face, older now, more refined. Yet in his eyes she still saw glimpses of the dreamer she once loved. "I wish things had been different, but I only came to ensure Oliver had a chance to meet you. If you want him in your life, then—" She swallowed. "We can figure it out. But if you'd rather we go—" "No." Jared's response was immediate, vehement. "Don't vanish again, please." He inhaled unsteadily. "I want to do right by him. Let me have time with him. Get to know him. And we'll handle the rest." The rest, they both knew, was a monolith of obstacles. Emma's indignation, Walter's disapproval, the press, financial complexities, and possibly an entire avalanche of legalities if things soured. Yet for now, Jared's expression was resolute. Sophie felt a pang of relief. She might have cursed him for the heartbreak in the past, but seeing sincerity in his eyes gave her a fragile hope that Oliver wouldn't grow up fatherless. Across the lounge, Robert finished his quiet conference with Emma and Walter. He cleared his throat. "We've decided, assuming Miss Carter consents, to proceed with a DNA test immediately. We have the connections to do it swiftly and confidentially. Once we have results, we'll reconvene. In the meantime, it's best Ms. Carter and her child remain somewhere less public." "Less public meaning you want them hidden away?" Sophie asked, letting a hint of steel into her voice. Robert stiffened. "For their own protection, and for Jared's. The media will have a frenzy if they find you wandering about. We can arrange a quiet suite in a reputable hotel, or better yet, on one of the Hamilton properties. Private security, minimal exposure. It's standard in these cases." Walter nodded gravely, arms still crossed. Yes, and our family attorneys will handle the test. We'll be thorough but discreet. Sophie's stomach clenched. This was the Hamilton style. Handle everything like a business problem. But maybe they were right. She did want Oliver shielded from a paparazzi onslaught. She glanced at Jared, who offered a small nod of encouragement. Emma, meanwhile, stood off to the side, rigid. Her silence radiated a sense of betrayal that Sophie couldn't ignore. "That's fine," Sophie said at last. "But let me be clear. I'm not relinquishing control of my son. We'll wait for your test and your staff, but Oliver stays with me. I won't let him out of my sight." "Of course," Jared said quietly. "I'd never suggest otherwise." Emma broke her silence with a clipped breath. "I'm going back to the party. We have damage control to do, Jared, and it's your party too. But I expect you to stand up beside me tonight. If you vanish, the speculation will only intensify." Jared's jaw tightened. "Give me a few minutes with them. Then I'll join you." Emma turned on a sharp heel, pulling out her phone. Walter and Robert exchanged a curt nod and followed, presumably to rally the waiting guests and put on a good face. The door swung shut, leaving Jared, Sophie, and Oliver, still seated behind the screen, quietly sipping juice, with an uneasy solitude. Sophie walked over to Oliver, brushed a hand over his hair. "We're going to go somewhere quieter tonight, honey, just for a while." "Are we going home soon?" Oliver asked, blinking. He was tired, confusion etched on his small features. Sophie glanced at Jared. It was the first time she realized she had no real home to bring Oliver back to, just a modest motel they'd checked into earlier. This city had been left behind 4 years ago. She had no allies here. Her pockets were nearly empty, and now, ironically, the only safe haven might be the same man she once believed had abandoned her. Jared knelt next to Oliver, letting a small, warm smile soften the child's worry. "I have a place you can stay, Oliver," he said gently. "You'll have your own bed, lots of space, and, well, we'll talk more in the morning. Is that all right?" Oliver hesitated, peering at Sophie. She nodded, though her insides quivered. "Yes, for tonight we'll stay somewhere nice. Then we'll figure out the rest." The plan was set in motion. Jared stepped out briefly, speaking to a staffer who nodded and hurried off. He returned, looking apologetic. "I need to go back to the ballroom for a short while. Keep the chaos to a minimum. Security will escort you both to a private elevator soon. A car will take you to my penthouse, if that's acceptable. You'll have an entire floor to yourself with staff to help if you need anything." Sophie saw in his face genuine concern. "All right," she agreed. "We'll go." Oliver gave a small yawn. The day's stress, plus the swirl of new faces, had drained him. Sophie helped him to his feet, smoothed down the front of his t-shirt. Jared hovered, wanting to say more, do more, but perhaps not knowing how. At last, he murmured, "Thank you for coming here tonight. I'm sorry it was so messy." Sophie could only nod. She wasn't sure if she was grateful or terrified that they were stepping into a labyrinth of Hamilton power plays. But one look at Oliver's innocent face told her that she was doing the right thing. For better or worse, the secret was out. Now it was time to see whether Jared Hamilton could be the father Oliver needed, or if the family empire and all its entangled loyalties would tear them apart before they even had a chance. Night had long settled over the city by the time Sophie and Oliver emerged through a private side entrance of the hotel. A uniformed driver stood by a sleek black SUV which idled quietly at the curb. 2 security officers dressed in dark suits guided mother and son into the back seat with a professional, detached efficiency. Sophie thought she detected a hint of sympathy in one guard's eyes. Perhaps he understood how overwhelming this must be. Or maybe she was just desperate for any scrap of kindness. Oliver pressed his face to the tinted window as the vehicle slipped away from the glitzy lights of the hotel. "Are we really going to Daddy's house?" he asked, voice muffled and tinged with disbelief. Sophie hugged him close, both to reassure him and to steady herself. "Yes, sweetie," she said, trying to sound brave. Just for tonight. It's late and we need a safe place to stay." Oliver nodded, but his attention was already wandering to the cityscape flashing by, an endless stretch of headlights and towering skyscrapers. Sophie exhaled a long breath, the day's events swirling inside her head. She felt an odd mix of relief and foreboding. Relief that Jared was stepping forward, that he wasn't dismissing her or ignoring Oliver. Foreboding because of all the unknowns that tomorrow would bring. The drive took less than 15 minutes before the SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath one of Midtown's most exclusive residential towers. At the security gate, guards checked credentials. Sophie caught sight of a sign bearing the Hamilton Holdings logo. It felt surreal that a piece of Jared's empire was opening its doors to her and Oliver after so many years of silence. A private elevator whisked them to the uppermost floors. The sense of luxury was undeniable. Soft, ambient lighting, a faint hum of hidden machinery, immaculate glass walls reflecting the city's neon glow. The elevator doors opened directly into a spacious foyer lined with polished marble floors. Standing there was an older woman with tidy silver hair and a warm, earnest smile. She wore the crisp attire of domestic staff, with a small lapel pin in Hamilton blue. "Good evening, Ms. Carter," she said gently, her voice a comforting hush. "I'm Margot. Mr. Hamilton called ahead. Let me know if you or your son need anything at all." Sophie gave a polite nod, trying not to stare at the vast penthouse behind Margot. She guided Oliver into the living area, an expanse of floor-to-ceiling windows that framed an unforgettable nighttime skyline. The city sparkled like a field of stars inverted below them. Oliver let out a breathy, "Wow," stepping carefully on the plush rug as though he might sink into it. Sophie managed a faint smile at his wonder. In their cramped life back home, skyscrapers were distant illusions, and a penthouse like this belonged to fairy tales. Margot gestured toward a hallway. "Your rooms are down this corridor. There's a bedroom for your son and a suite for you. There's also a smaller living area in case Oliver wants privacy to watch cartoons or read. I've prepared some snacks, fruit, cookies, sandwiches, whatever he likes." Oliver's eyes lit up at the mention of snacks. "Cookies?" he echoed hopefully, pulling on Sophie's sleeve. Sophie fought a surge of emotion, guilt that this kind of comfort was so new to her child, gratitude that at least for one night he could feel secure. "We'll settle in," she said, glancing at Margot. "Thank you," Margot nodded, then added softly, "Mr. Hamilton mentioned he'd join you later, or in the morning if tonight becomes too late. Please make yourselves at home. I'll be nearby should you need anything." Left alone, Sophie took Oliver's hand and wandered deeper into the penthouse. She'd lived frugally for years, cheap motels, quick sublets, always working 2 or 3 part-time jobs to cover bills. It was overwhelming to see the scale of Jared's success. Contemporary art adorned the walls, the furnishings were tasteful but clearly costly, and the city lights shimmered through massive windows like a living mural. Oliver soon forgot his shyness, tugging Sophie toward the nearest bedroom. "Can I see where I sleep?" His excitement was a balm. He was still just a curious boy, not a piece in some grown-up power struggle. The bedroom was equally grand, a soft bed with pillows piled high, a reading nook by a window, a TV discreetly mounted. Sophie knelt, encouraging Oliver to explore. "We won't stay here forever," she told him gently. "Just for a little while, okay?" He nodded, distracted by the novelty. "This is so cool. Is Daddy really rich, Mom?" Sophie didn't want to delve into adult complexities. "Yes," she answered simply, smoothing back his hair. "He's worked very hard for everything he has." And then she added in her mind, though maybe he lost something precious in the process. She noticed a small care basket on the nightstand. Children's toothpaste, a toothbrush, mild soap, shampoo, even a brand new pair of pajamas. Someone must have dashed out to buy them. The Hamilton efficiency was staggering. Oliver hopped onto the bed, already rummaging through the basket. "Mom, look, a toothbrush with a dinosaur on it." Sophie laughed softly. "That's great, honey. Why don't we change into PJs and then have one cookie before bed?" She yearned for normalcy, even if it was fleeting. They spent the next half hour settling in. Oliver devoured 2 cookies with a glass of milk, then brushed his teeth thoroughly, dinosaur toothbrush in hand, before nestling under the duvet. He yawned, eyelids drooping heavily. Sophie read him a short story on her phone, mindful to keep her voice low. She had just finished the last line when his breathing slowed, drifting into sleep. Slipping out of the room, Sophie closed the door part way, leaving a soft glow of light from the hall. She wandered back into the main living area, where the vast cityscape twinkled like an impossible dream. Exhaustion tugged at her, but restless thoughts kept her awake. She had arrived at the party with little more than battered hope, and now she was in Jared's penthouse, half expecting him to stride in at any moment. A quiet beep sounded from the foyer. Sophie stiffened, bracing herself. Moments later, the elevator doors opened onto the private entrance. Jared stepped out, looking drained. He removed his suit jacket and set it aside before noticing Sophie near the windows. He paused in the soft light. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said quietly. "How's Oliver?" "Sleeping," Sophie replied, hugging her own arms. He was exhausted. Jared nodded. He approached, gaze drifting to the luminous skyline. Silence thickened between them. There was too much to say, too many questions that had never been answered. She gathered her courage, turning to face him. "So, how did the rest of the party go?" He gave a humorless chuckle. "Damage control, as Emma called it. My father and Mr. Lawrence tried to keep rumors in check. Emma's furious. Half the guests left early, the other half hovered to gather gossip. The media smelled blood." He looked at Sophie with remorse. "I'm sorry you got swept up in it. I wanted to protect you both from that scene. I just didn't act fast enough." Sophie's heart squeezed. She recognized sincerity, but also the weight of everything that burdened him. "Oliver and we're fine," she murmured. "Though I guess nothing can be the same after tonight. It's out there now." Jared's expression darkened with regret and determination. "Yes, it's out there." He gestured for her to sit on one of the plush couches. Once she did, he sat across from her, leaning forward, hands clasped. "We'll do the DNA test in the morning, a discreet lab. It's just a formality. I'm certain he's mine. But my father, well, he wants official proof." Sophie nodded, picking at her fingernail. "I understand. I don't mind if it's done properly. I want everything above board." He paused, searching her face. Then, "After that, what's your plan?" "I don't have a big plan, Jared. I left my life here years ago, and I've been living out of state, raising Oliver on my own." Her voice caught. "My job situation is precarious. I used the last of my savings to travel here. We don't have a stable place to go back to." His brow furrowed. "Why didn't you ever reach out for help? Even if you thought I was... Well, you could have come to me, my father, or someone in the family. You shouldn't have struggled like that." Sophie's anger flared, though she kept her voice contained. "I did try to contact you once, maybe twice. I never got through, and I wasn't about to beg the Hamiltons. Why would they care about a pregnant nobody from—" "You're not a nobody," he insisted, voice thick with regret. "And Oliver is my son. If I'd known, I would have been there. I can't change the past, but I refuse to let you both fend for yourselves anymore." Tears stung the corners of Sophie's eyes. She inhaled slowly. "Look, I appreciate it. I do. But I'm not here to become some hush-hush arrangement. I'm not after a payout or, you think I'll just sign a check and hope you disappear?" He shook his head vehemently. "No. I want to do more than throw money at this. I missed his birth, his first steps, his first words. Everything." Bitterness laced his tone. "And I'm not giving up on him now." Sophie felt her defenses falter. She wasn't sure how to handle a Jared so honest, so clearly remorseful about lost time. She'd spent years convinced he wouldn't care if he knew about Oliver. Now, confronted with the sincerity in his eyes, her assumptions began crumbling. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, face tensing. "It's Emma," he muttered. For a moment, guilt shadowed his features. "I should answer." He stood and walked a few steps away, pressing the phone to his ear. Sophie heard fragments. "Yes, I'm home." "No, that's not fair." "Emma, listen." Then his voice dropped, carrying more quietly. Sophie stared at the city lights, heart pounding. A swirl of complicated emotion rose in her chest. She could guess how that conversation was going. Emma was his fiancée. Tonight's fiasco had humiliated her, threatened her social standing, and thrown a major wrench in wedding plans. Jared ended the call, exhaling a ragged breath. "She's angry," he said softly, "and hurt. She wants me to fix things to reassure her. But I can't just wave a wand and make Oliver disappear." His gaze flicked to the hall leading to Oliver's bedroom. "Nor would I want to." Sophie nodded. She felt a pang of compassion for Emma. No woman deserved to have her engagement overshadowed by a secret child. Yet Sophie also felt fiercely protective of Oliver, whose need for a father wasn't something to be swept away for the sake of any wedding. "I'll figure it out," Jared said, as though trying to convince himself. He took a seat again, this time closer. "In the meantime, stay here. Let Oliver rest. We'll do the test. And when it confirms he's mine, we'll discuss a real arrangement for his future." Sophie blinked. "Arrangement?" He raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I only mean we'll talk about living situations, financial support, schooling. Everything. He deserves the best." She studied him, seeing the weight of fatherhood settle on him in real time. Slowly, she nodded. "All right, we'll talk," she whispered. They lingered a moment, silent. Then Jared rose, offering a hand to help Sophie up from the couch. "You must be exhausted. I'll show you your room. Margot prepared it." She followed him down the corridor, stopping first at Oliver's door. Inside, Oliver slept soundly, curled around a plush pillow. They paused at the threshold, watching him. Sophie felt Jared's presence close, felt him grappling with the idea that the little boy behind that door was his flesh and blood. Then Jared quietly led her to a second bedroom. It was smaller than the master suite, likely a guest room, but still more luxurious than any place Sophie had stayed in years. A soft lamp cast warm light on a perfectly made bed with pale blue linens. "You'll be comfortable here," he said gently, stepping back. "If you need anything, I'm down the hall. I'll try not to bother you. I know we have a lot to figure out." With that, he left, pulling the door partially shut. Sophie stood in the center of the quiet room, heart pounding in the hush. The events of the night crashed over her like a wave, leaving her breathless, uncertain, and strangely buoyed by the knowledge that, for the first time in ages, Oliver had a chance for something better. Morning arrived in a veil of pale sunlight that glimmered through the penthouse windows. Sophie woke to a moment of disorientation before the events of the previous night crashed over her. She was in Jared Hamilton's guest room, with Oliver asleep down the hall. Outside, the city stretched in a sprawl of high-rises and streaming traffic, as though indifferent to the tumult in her personal life. She rose quietly, taking a moment to smooth her rumpled hair in the mirror. Her reflection looked tired, shadows beneath her eyes, lips pressed thin with worry. She recalled how Jared had taken Oliver and her in last night, how he'd insisted on doing the right thing. Despite the tension swirling around them all, he had been kind, compassionate even. That alone was enough to stir a disconcerting warmth in her chest. She slipped into the hallway, making sure Oliver was still asleep in his bed. The door was ajar. He lay sprawled comfortably on soft linens, his small body relaxed, one hand curled around the edge of his pillow. Sophie felt a rush of gratitude that he seemed so at peace. Whatever trials awaited them, at least she'd given him this moment of safety. The sound of muted voices drifted from the main living area. Following it, she found Jared and another man speaking in hushed tones near the windows. The man wore a crisp gray suit and held a leather portfolio, his body language exuding professional composure. Jared, still in casual loungewear, had his arms crossed, listening intently. The moment Sophie stepped forward, Jared lifted his gaze. Tension eased from his face. "Morning," he greeted quietly, offering a faint, apologetic smile. The other man straightened and smiled politely at Sophie. "Ms. Carter, good morning. I'm Thomas Wells, one of Mr. Hamilton's attorneys." Then, turning to Jared, he added, "I can wait until you're ready to continue." "No, it's fine," Jared said, glancing from Sophie to Thomas. "We were just discussing the DNA test arrangements. I'd like you to be involved in every detail, Sophie." She took a steadying breath, stepping closer. "All right. Whatever it takes to put everyone's doubts to rest." Thomas cleared his throat, referencing papers in his portfolio. "We've scheduled a private appointment this morning at a reputable lab across town. The results will be expedited, likely a couple of days. Of course, Mr. Hamilton will cover all costs. Both you and Oliver simply need to provide samples. They'll handle the rest." Sophie nodded, trying to tamp down a flicker of anxiety. She'd never done anything like this before. She couldn't help feeling as if she, too, were on trial, her truth subject to legal verification. Jared placed a hand gently on her elbow. "We'll go together. I don't want you handling this alone." Before she could answer, Oliver emerged from the hallway, hair ruffled, rubbing his eyes. He paused when he saw Jared's attorney, momentarily shy. Sophie gave him a reassuring nod. "Good morning, buddy. Did you sleep okay?" He nodded, wandering over to Sophie's side. She placed an arm around his shoulders. Jared studied the boy's face, a slight softness touching his own expression. Then, remembering himself, he gestured to Thomas. "We're about finished here." Thomas offered Oliver a smile. "Nice to meet you, Oliver. I'll see you later today at the lab, all right?" Oliver blinked uncertainly but nodded. With a polite goodbye, the attorney stepped into the private elevator, leaving them alone in the hush of the penthouse once more. Margot appeared almost on cue, carrying a tray of breakfast items, fresh fruit, warm croissants, a small pot of tea, and a glass of orange juice. "Good morning, everyone," she greeted. "I thought you'd like something to eat before your day begins." Oliver perked up at the sight of the pastries. "Mom, can I have a croissant?" Sophie managed a small laugh at his enthusiasm. "Of course." She looked to Jared, grateful for these gestures of care. He seemed more relaxed in casual clothes. No suit jacket, hair slightly tousled. There was a moment of comfortable silence as Oliver happily took a seat at the kitchen island and started nibbling on a croissant, while Margot poured juice into a glass for him. Sophie helped herself to a cup of tea, her nerves taut. Glancing at Jared, she cleared her throat. "Have you talked to Emma since last night?" A flicker of emotion passed over Jared's face. "Briefly, by phone. She's with her father, and from what I gather, they're strategizing a response for the press. Given the fiasco at the engagement party, they want to control the narrative as much as possible." Sophie nodded, guilt warring with frustration. This was bigger than her or Oliver. There were reputations, business alliances, perhaps even families' fortunes at stake. A swirl of worry threatened to undermine her. Would Oliver be scapegoated? Would Jared yield to his father's demands? The questions churned in her mind, not yet answered. Jared must have sensed her unease. He moved closer, voice quiet. "Listen, about Emma. None of this changes the fact that Oliver is my son. I know you're worried the family might push you away, but I won't let them. No matter what Emma decides or how upset she is, Oliver comes first." She caught a faint tremor in his tone, as though he were steeling himself against the friction that might come. Sophie's chest tightened. She believed him, but the Hamiltons and Lawrences were powerful forces. She couldn't help but wonder if Jared's conviction would withstand all the pressure they could exert. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." They finished a sparse breakfast in relative calm. Oliver devoured fruit slices and asked occasional questions about the city view. Jard patiently answered, pointing out famous landmarks through the glass. Afterward, Margot gently reminded them of their schedule. A car would collect them for the lab appointment in under an hour. Sophie took Oliver back to their rooms, helping him change into a neat pair of clothes, simple jeans and a striped polo shirt that Margot had purchased. They were new, tags snipped off. The care that Jared's household staff had put into meeting Oliver's needs made Sophie's heart ache with gratitude. When they all reconvened at the foyer, Jared had changed as well. Sober navy suit, crisp shirt, no tie, hair combed. His expression was resolute, yet he attempted a reassuring smile at Oliver. "Ready to go?" Oliver nodded, clutching Sophie's hand. Once more, they rode the private elevator down to the underground garage, sliding into a black town car. 2 security men followed in a separate vehicle, another detail that Sophie found both comforting and unsettling. Jared, evidently, was taking no chances with the media or gawkers. Traffic was dense, but they arrived at a discreet medical building on the Upper East Side soon enough. A nurse greeted them with a polite smile, guiding them to a private waiting room. Sophie felt Oliver tense at the antiseptic smell of the corridors. She squeezed his hand gently, whispering that it would be quick, just a small swab, no needles needed for him. Jard spoke with the lab manager in hushed tones, signing documents and ensuring the confidentiality agreement was airtight. Soon, Sophie and Oliver were led to a small examination room. A technician explained the procedure with soothing efficiency, swabbing the inside of Oliver's cheek, labeling the sample carefully. Sophie did the same, though it was primarily Oliver's paternity that needed confirmation, not hers. Finally, Jared stepped in for his own sample. Oliver watched intently, eyes wide with curiosity as they swabbed Jared's cheek. An odd hush lingered in the air, the quiet drama of father and son undergoing the simplest of tests to confirm a bond that was obvious to anyone with eyes. But still, the Hamilton Empire demanded proof. Afterward, as they collected their coats, the technician smiled. "We'll expedite as requested. Results should be ready in a day or two, possibly by tomorrow. We'll notify Mr. Hamilton's attorney directly." "Thank you," Sophie murmured. The swirl of tension in her belly eased a fraction. Whatever the Hamiltons believed, official results would soon erase any doubt. They left the lab, stepping into a mild midday sun that glimmered off the rows of parked cars. Jard lingered on the sidewalk, ignoring stares from a few passers-by. Oliver shifted from foot to foot, looking up at the big, glamorous Manhattan buildings. A sense of displacement weighed on Sophie. This was her old city, yet she felt like a stranger in it. Once they were back in the town car, Jared spoke. "Oliver, do you like museums or parks? Maybe we can spend some time together this afternoon." Sophie blinked at him, mildly surprised. "You aren't going to the office?" He shook his head. "Not today. My schedule's a mess after last night, and I don't want to just bury myself in work. I need to figure out a plan for you both. And," he added with a softer glance at Oliver, "I'd like to start being a dad, if that's okay." Oliver perked up. "Yes. Can we see dinosaurs? Like in a museum?" Jared looked to Sophie for confirmation. She felt a flurry of mixed emotions, excitement for Oliver to have such an opportunity, anxiety about being spotted by the press. But Jared's hopeful expression disarmed her. "Sure," she agreed. "Dinosaurs sound great, but maybe we should be careful about paparazzi." Jared sighed. "You're right. The Natural History Museum is always crowded and we might draw attention, but I have a membership and know a few staff there. Maybe we can arrange a low-key visit. Let's at least try." If it gets too busy, we can leave." Oliver bounced in his seat, and Sophie felt a twinge of happiness at seeing him so thrilled. Still, a small voice in her mind warned that normalcy might be a fleeting privilege in Jared's world. There would always be watchers, critics, and a swirl of gossip. True to Jared's word, the next couple of hours passed in an almost surreal semblance of family time. They arrived at a side entrance to the museum, escorted discreetly by staff so they avoided the main crowds. Oliver's eyes shone as he roamed the halls of towering dinosaur skeletons, gaping at the enormous Tyrannosaurus Rex exhibit, giggling when Jared hoisted him slightly for a better view. Sophie hovered close, silently marveling at how natural it felt. Jared's hand on Oliver's shoulder, a quiet pride lighting his face as Oliver peppered him with questions. Occasionally, Sophie noticed the curious stares of bystanders. A random passerby whispered, "Is that Jared Hamilton?" A family recognized him and tried snapping a photo, but Jared's security swiftly intervened, gently discouraging any fuss. Sophie's stomach knotted. This was the reality of life with a billionaire father. But seeing Oliver's unfiltered excitement, she resolved to savor the moment. They ended the excursion with a quick lunch in a private corner of the museum cafe. Over sandwiches and lemonade, Oliver chattered about fossils and how big the dinosaur claws were. Jared listened attentively, occasionally exchanging glances with Sophie as if to say, "I missed so much, but I'm here now." She found herself smiling, oddly comforted by his presence. On their way out, Jared's phone began vibrating incessantly, snapping him from the warm cocoon of fatherhood. With a resigned look, he answered. Sophie could guess who it was, Walter or Emma or lawyers wanting updates on the messy situation. Whatever the conversation, Jared kept his voice low, offering Oliver a parting grin and a thumbs up as they left the museum. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Sophie was emotionally drained but quietly grateful for the day's small victory. Oliver, yawning, clutched a souvenir dinosaur plush he'd convinced Jared to buy. Jared's face carried a mix of joy and stress, as if every second with Oliver was precious but overshadowed by the storms gathering outside their fleeting bubble of peace. They stepped off the private elevator into the foyer, and Sophie immediately sensed tension in the air. Margot stood there, looking uneasily from Jared to Sophie. "Sir, Ms. Emma is waiting in the living room." Jared's posture stiffened. He glanced at Sophie apologetically. "I didn't know she'd come here." Sophie's heart lurched. Of course Emma had a right to see Jared. This was still his fiancé. But the last thing Sophie wanted was a confrontation in front of Oliver. She nodded, stepping protectively beside her son. Jared exhaled. "Oliver, honey, can you go with Margot and show her your new dinosaur? She can get you settled with some milk or a snack. I need to talk to someone." Oliver opened his mouth to protest, but saw the seriousness on his mother's face. Reluctantly, he nodded. "Okay." Margot gently ushered Oliver toward the kitchen, disappearing around a corner. That left Sophie in uneasy limbo, aware Emma was just a few steps away. Jared seemed to sense her nerves. He touched her arm lightly. "I'll handle this. You can go to your room if you'd rather avoid—" "No," she said, summoning her courage. "I can handle talking to Emma. She deserves honesty." Jared studied her, respect flickering in his expression. Then he guided her into the living area, where Emma Lawrence stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms folded. She wore a fitted designer dress, her hair styled to perfection, but her eyes were red-rimmed as though she'd been crying or battling fury. At the sight of Sophie, Emma's gaze hardened. Sophie braced herself for whatever storm Emma was about to unleash, and for the realization that in the next few minutes everything might change yet again. Emma's posture was rigid as she turned toward them, posture screaming both indignation and hurt. Sunlight filtered through the towering windows, illuminating the tension in her eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. Sophie held her breath, acutely aware of how out of place she felt in Jared's penthouse, how easily Emma could dismiss her as an intruder. Jared cleared his throat first. "Emma," he began, voice deliberately calm, "I didn't realize you were coming by." Emma's lips compressed into a thin line. "Of course you didn't. You've been busy playing the family man all day, apparently." Her gaze cut to Sophie, then darted around as though scanning for Oliver. "Where's the child?" Sophie squared her shoulders, refusing to wilt under Emma's glare. "Oliver is with Margot. He doesn't need to be dragged into conflict." Emma took a slow breath. Conflict. Yes, I suppose that's a mild term for what's happening. My fiancé is keeping another woman and a child in our future home, and the tabloids are having a field day calling it the Hamilton love triangle scandal. Do you know how humiliating it was to see paparazzi photos of you three exiting the museum this afternoon? Sophie's stomach knotted. She'd known the museum visit carried risks, but it had meant the world to Oliver. She spoke softly. "We're sorry if we caused a scene, but Oliver has never been to the city before. Jared wanted to spend time with him." Emma's jaw tightened. "And you, Ms. Carter, are living here now? Just like that?" Sophie glanced at Jared, then answered, "Temporarily. We're waiting for DNA results and trying to shield Oliver from a media frenzy. There's no plan to intrude on your life permanently." Jared stepped closer to Emma, voice controlled. "It's not about intrusion, Emma. It's about doing right by Oliver. He's my son, and that won't change, no matter how upset you are." She flinched at the word son. Sophie could see the swirl of pain behind Emma's anger. This was a woman who'd believed she was building a perfect life with Jared. Now everything was overshadowed by a boy who had Jared's dark hair and ready smile. Emma let out a harsh exhale. "I told you last night to fix this. Is your idea of a solution letting them move in and giving the tabloids more fodder?" Jared's voice rose a notch. "They're not moved in. It's a temporary arrangement until we figure out custody, schooling, everything. We still have to decide how to go forward." "You mean, you still have to decide if you're actually going to marry me?" Emma's eyes welled, a crack in her composure. "Because don't pretend this isn't a direct threat to our engagement, Jared. Everyone's whispering that it's all doomed, that I'll walk away in shame." Sophie felt a pang of empathy despite Emma's hostility. She herself had experienced heartbreak that shaped her last 4 years. But Emma clearly had more to lose. Her family's pride, her social standing, the entire future she'd mapped out. Sophie quietly spoke up. "I'm not looking to destroy your relationship. I never asked Jared to call off your wedding." Emma's voice trembled. "But that's effectively what might happen. Look at the position you've put him in." "Stop it," Jared snapped, stepping between them. "You're blaming Sophie for something that came about because I didn't know the truth years ago. If I'd known, maybe none of this would have exploded the way it did. But we can't rewrite the past." Emma crossed her arms, tears threatening to spill. "So what do you propose, Jared? That I accept a child you fathered with another woman? That I endure the media's pitying glances and vile speculation? That your father pretends to welcome them into the Hamilton family?" She scoffed, bitterness lacing her words. "He'll never stand for that." Jared's jaw flexed. "My father doesn't control my decisions. And if you're implying that Oliver, my child, should just vanish to protect our image, that's not going to happen. This is my responsibility. I won't abandon him." Emma flung a furious look at Sophie. "You've certainly tied him up neatly, haven't you?" Sophie bristled at the insinuation. "I didn't come here expecting Jared to drop everything for us. I only wanted Oliver to know who his father is. Jared chose to step up on his own. No one forced him." Emma gave a shaky laugh. "Of course he chose that. He's a decent man. One reason I fell in love with him. But in so doing, he's tanking our entire future." She exhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. "Jared, my father and your father are meeting tomorrow with crisis PR specialists. They want a statement clarifying the timeline, implying that you had no knowledge of the pregnancy, that it was an old fling, and that you and I remain committed to each other. They want you to express support for the child, but keep it in polite terms. No mention of living arrangements. Sophie's stomach sank. It was the perfect spin that might keep the Hamilton-Lawrence alliance afloat, but at the expense of acknowledging Oliver as a truly welcomed part of the family. Jared frowned. I see. So they want me to treat him like a minor inconvenience that popped up from some fling while still maintaining my engagement to you, as if everything's neatly compartmentalized. Emma's silence spoke volumes. Eventually she forced out, "They think it's for the best. We salvage our wedding, your business deals remain stable, and Ms. Carter's child gets some hush-hush financial arrangement. Everyone moves on." Sophie's cheeks flamed. This was exactly what she'd feared, being treated like some scandal to be bribed away. She wanted to speak up, but Jared was already shaking his head, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "I won't do that. Oliver isn't a footnote. If the test results confirm he's mine, as I fully believe they will, I'm acknowledging him publicly and personally. We'll find a way to handle the press, but I won't demean the truth for a convenient storyline." Emma's expression twisted with resentment. "You always have to be the hero, don't you?" A heavy silence descended. Outside the windows, the city hummed with midday energy, oblivious to the emotional war inside the penthouse. Sophie wondered if there was any path forward that didn't end in heartbreak for someone. Emma spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I can't do this, Jared. You expect me to smile, to stay while you reorder your entire life around this child?" Tears glimmered at the corners of her eyes. "I feel betrayed, humiliated, and I'm not sure I can spend the rest of my life with a man who's already a father with someone else." Jared's gaze flickered with hurt. "I never wanted to betray you. But the reality is I am a father. It's not optional or a minor detail. It's who I am, who I need to be for Oliver." Emma swallowed hard, turning to Sophie as though searching for a scapegoat. But her anger finally gave way to heartbreak. "I need time. I can't just keep planning a wedding in the middle of this circus. My father may try to strong-arm you, but I won't be paraded around for show. I came to see if you'd commit to some compromise. But it's clear your mind's made up." Jared's mouth worked silently, remorse in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice hoarse. "I know you are too, but I won't lie." Emma looked at Sophie then, a flicker of grudging respect or sorrow crossing her face. Sophie couldn't decipher which. "I don't blame the child," she said softly, "but this is too big a bombshell. It changes everything." No one contradicted her. They all felt it. Emma inhaled, gathering her composure, then straightened her shoulders. "I'll speak to you later, Jared. Once the results come in, we'll figure out if there's any path forward for us. But if you insist on publicly claiming that boy as a Hamilton, well, prepare for your father to go ballistic. And don't expect my father to go easy on you either." She made a quick exit, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The elevator doors closed behind her with a decisive clang. Jared stood motionless, as though the conversation had drained him of energy. Sophie softly exhaled, aching with empathy even as her own heart churned with unease. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. He grimaced. "Hardly. But she deserved that honesty at least." He looked to Sophie, searching her face. "I'm sorry you had to hear all that. None of this is easy." Sophie stepped closer, compelled by a rare urge to comfort him. "You've done nothing wrong. We can't change the past. We only deal with what's in front of us now." Jared nodded, lips thinning. "What's in front of me is a father who's going to demand I salvage my wedding, or let go of my stake in Hamilton Holdings, a fiancé who might walk away, and a son I desperately want to protect." He raked a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure how to keep all these worlds from colliding. A beat of silence passed, heavy with unspoken fears. Sophie's voice emerged in a near whisper. "Perhaps you can't. Perhaps one will have to give." Jared lifted his gaze, meeting hers in the soft daylight. 100 emotions flickered in his dark eyes. Guilt, resolve, maybe a sliver of hope. "Yeah," he agreed quietly, "but for Oliver's sake, I have to make the right choice." Sophie thought of her son, happily unaware in the kitchen with Margot. Then she thought of Emma, a woman devastated by an unexpected child in her fiancé's life, and she recalled her own raw struggle for survival the past 4 years. Every path forward seemed fraught with sacrifice. Yet for Oliver, she would face any storm. Jared gestured to the hallway where Oliver had gone. "Shall we go check on him?" His voice was gentle. "We might not have all the answers, but at least we can show him he's not alone." Sophie nodded, warmth blooming in her chest despite the chaos. "Yes, let's do that." Together they walked down the corridor, footsteps echoing on polished floors. Sophie could feel the tension lingering in the air, the echoes of Emma's heartbreak and the shadow of Walter Hamilton's impending wrath. Yet for a moment, the simple act of heading toward Oliver, united in their care for him, felt like a quiet triumph in a world that was otherwise spinning out of control. The next 2 days passed in a restless limbo marked by hushed phone calls, tense discussions with attorneys, and Jared's private determination to do right by his newly discovered son. The laboratory had promised expedited DNA results, and each passing hour stretched taut with anticipation. Sophie felt it acutely, an undercurrent of anxiety shared by Jared, and perhaps by every soul watching the Hamilton drama unfold. Oliver, in his innocent way, remained cheerfully oblivious to most of the tension. He explored every corner of the sprawling penthouse, helped Margot bake cookies, and gleefully showed Jared his dinosaur plush whenever Jared returned from meetings. Each evening, Jared made sure to have dinner with them. On the surface, these were sweet, simple moments, almost domestic. Underneath, Sophie recognized a powerful calm before the storm. They heard little from Emma since her upset departure, though Jared said she had retreated to her family's estate. Meanwhile, Walter Hamilton summoned Jared to an endless series of crisis management sessions. Press speculation simmered. Tabloids ran front-page stories about the mysterious Sophie Carter and her son, though Jared's PR team tried to suppress it. Sophie avoided going out, wanting to shield Oliver from the circus. It was late afternoon when the call finally came. The lab had the DNA results. Jared's attorney, Thomas Wells, arranged a brief private meeting at Hamilton Holdings headquarters. Jared insisted Sophie attend, bringing Oliver so there would be no room for doubt. At 3:30, they took the elevator to one of the upper floors of a sleek corporate tower, where Thomas led them into a quiet conference room. Sophie's heart fluttered with nerves. Even though she knew the truth, she dreaded any last-minute twist. Oliver sensed the gravity, clutching her hand. Jared stood on her other side, tension evident in his set jaw. Thomas cleared his throat, setting a sealed envelope on the gleaming table. "I have here the test results. They are conclusive." His gaze flicked from Jared to Sophie. "Mr. Hamilton, Ms. Carter, Oliver Carter is, with over 99.99% certainty, your biological son." Sophie inhaled sharply, relief washing over her. There would be no further attempts to dismiss Oliver's paternity, no seed of doubt. For Jared, though, the confirmation struck deep. He nodded, exhaling a breath that seemed to carry both gratitude and a certain finality. "I knew it," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Thomas continued, "We'll keep the official documents secure and share them only as necessary. Mr. Hamilton, your father has requested a copy for his legal team." "Of course he has," Jared said wryly, running a hand through his hair. He looked at Oliver, who stared up, not fully grasping the implications, but clearly feeling the seriousness. Jared lowered to one knee, meeting Oliver's eyes. "You hear that?" The test says what we already knew in our hearts. You're my son." He managed a grin, voice catching. "I'm officially your dad, Oliver." Oliver looked uncertain, then shyly smiled. He glanced at Sophie as though seeking permission. She nodded encouragingly. "It's true, honey, and it means no one can ever say otherwise." Oliver's small arms tentatively looped around Jared's neck. Jared hugged him gently in return, blinking rapidly to contain his emotion. Sophie's heart clenched at the sight. This was a moment she'd once thought impossible. A discreet knock at the conference room door interrupted. An assistant leaned in, glancing apologetically. "Mr. Hamilton, your father is here. He'd like a word." Jared's smile faded. He rose, looking to Sophie. "Let's do this together," he murmured as though bracing for battle. Sophie licked her lips nervously. The memory of Walter Hamilton's stern disapproval at the engagement party still loomed. But for Oliver's sake, she'd face him. "Okay," she said, trying to sound steady. They followed the assistant down a marble-floored corridor that led to an executive lounge. Walter Hamilton stood by a glass wall that offered panoramic views of Manhattan. He turned as they approached, heavy eyebrows arching. Two older men in tailored suits, likely longtime Hamilton legal advisors, stood behind him, arms folded. Walter's gaze fell immediately on Oliver. For a split second, Sophie thought she saw a flicker of something like regret in his eyes, but it vanished, replaced by the austere authority of a billionaire patriarch. "So," Walter began, "we have the results." Jared nudged Sophie forward gently, then addressed his father. "Yes, it's confirmed. Oliver is my son." He drew a breath. "I plan to acknowledge him officially, provide for him, and ensure he's included in the Hamilton family in every sense. That's non-negotiable." Walter's lips pressed into a line, his stern face unreadable. The two lawyers behind him exchanged glances. "I see," Walter finally said, tone measured. "You realize the ramifications, the media frenzy, the questions about inheritance, the damage to our brand's reputation." Jared's jaw tightened. "I'd say it's more damaging to deny the existence of my child." Walter gave a short, humorless laugh. "Your moral stance might be admirable, but it's not how these matters are traditionally handled. If Miss Carter had come forward discreetly, we could have resolved it more quietly." He leveled a pointed look at Sophie. "However, here we are." Sophie bristled. "We did attempt discretion. We're not the ones stirring up tabloids." She spoke in a calm, firm voice, though her pulse hammered. "All Oliver wants is to know his father. There's no scheme to tarnish your brand." Walter held her gaze, then switched to addressing Jared. "The Lawrences are livid. You're jeopardizing a strategic union, not to mention significant business deals. Your engagement to Emma is hanging by a thread, and you refuse to offer any compromise. Is that correct?" Jared nodded grimly. "Yes. If being with Emma means denying Oliver or diminishing him to a footnote, I won't do it." Walter looked distinctly displeased, yet Sophie noticed a flicker of respect. The father studied his son, then exhaled. "Fine, but you'll have to contend with the fallout. The Lawrences won't take this lying down, and you can expect every vulture in the media to circle." He gestured at the lawyers. "We've drafted a statement you might consider issuing. It acknowledges the boy but asks for privacy, emphasizes we're handling everything internally. It also expresses regret for how this surfaced, putting the onus on external misunderstandings. A gentler spin." The older of the two lawyers spoke up, an almost weary tone in his voice. "Mr. Hamilton, we strongly advise a formal custody agreement with Ms. Carter to avoid any further misunderstandings. Financial support, visitation rights, schooling, everything should be legally documented." Sophie stiffened. She didn't like the coldness of the term custody agreement, but recognized their logic. Jared placed a reassuring hand on her back. "We plan to figure out the details, yes," he said to the lawyers, "but Sophie and I will discuss it first." He looked at his father. "We'll issue a statement on our own terms. I'm not going to apologize for my son's existence." A loaded silence followed. Walter appeared ready to argue, but held back. Instead, he turned a pointed gaze to Oliver, who had been clinging to Sophie's leg. In a halting tone, Walter addressed him. "Hello, Oliver. You look healthy." It was a bizarrely stiff greeting, but it seemed like an attempt at politeness at least. Oliver peeked up, unsure how to respond to the imposing man. Sophie gently stroked his hair. "Oliver, this is Jared's father, Mr. Hamilton. You can say hello." Oliver mustered a quiet, "Hi." Walter offered a curt nod. If he felt any warmth for his grandson, it remained tightly masked. Sophie swallowed her disappointment. Oliver deserved a loving extended family. She wondered if the Hamilton patriarch would ever soften. The elder Hamilton cleared his throat. "Well, we'll expect your decision on the statement soon. Meanwhile, the Lawrences have scheduled a meeting with you tomorrow, Jared. They want a final answer regarding the engagement. Emma may speak to you privately, but her father wants a full discussion of how this child affects the union." Jared sighed heavily. "I'll meet them, but they need to understand I won't compromise on Oliver's acceptance." Walter's lips curled in the faintest grimace. "Good luck, then." He glanced at Sophie, a silent, pointed look that seemed to say, "Don't make this harder than it is." Then, with a brisk nod to the lawyers, he departed, leaving the tension in his wake. Once Walter and his entourage were gone, Jared visibly relaxed, shoulders sagging. Sophie let out a breath she'd been holding. Oliver, picking up on the atmosphere, whispered, "Can we go now, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart," she said gently. She met Jared's gaze with uncertainty. "Are we done here?" Jared inclined his head. "Yes, for now." He placed a hand on Oliver's shoulder. "Let's go home." Home. The words spilled from his lips so naturally. Sophie followed him from the executive lounge, heart pounding. She couldn't ignore the swirl of emotion. Relief that Oliver's paternity was recognized, anxiety over the looming confrontation with Emma and her family, and a cautious sense of belonging. Jared had said, "Let's go home," as though they were a family already. They returned to the penthouse soon after, the early evening light gilding the skyline. Margot greeted them with her usual calm professionalism, and Oliver sprinted off to retrieve his dinosaur plush. Jared and Sophie were left in the living area, where city lights glimmered through the windows. She perched on the arm of a sofa, exhaling. "That was intense." Jared sank onto the couch, resting his head in his hands for a moment. "My father is furious, but he's also seen I'm not backing down. That's progress, maybe." Sophie nodded, recalling Walter's stony expression. He seemed less dismissive than before, at least. Like maybe he understands it's not going away. Jared glanced at her, something like gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you for standing by me. I know it can't be easy facing my father's disdain." Sophie offered a tentative smile. "We're in this together, I guess." He sat up, raking a hand through his hair. "We need to talk about a custody arrangement, something official that protects Oliver. But before we get into legal jargon, I'd like to discuss something more personal." He hesitated, words catching. "Sophie, you've been living in constant upheaval. You said you don't have a stable home to return to. And now that Oliver is a confirmed Hamilton, I don't want him yanked from place to place." Her throat tightened. She'd known some form of this conversation was coming, yet hearing it aloud felt intimidating. "I understand," she said, voice quiet. "What do you propose?" "I propose you stay in New York. In fact, I'd like you and Oliver to stay here, in the penthouse, at least until we figure out a long-term plan." He lifted a hand, forestalling her objections. "You can't bounce from motels, and I want to be around my son, to develop a real bond with him. If you leave, we'll lose this precious time." Sophie's heart pounded. She glanced toward the hall where Oliver played, safe and content. "Jared, living here with you is complicated. What if Emma—" He pressed his lips together, expression pained. "I don't know if Emma and I have a future. If we do, it will have to include Oliver. If that's unacceptable to her, then we may not have a relationship at all." His voice broke slightly. "I'm not sure what tomorrow holds, but I know I want Oliver here now. And, well, I trust you to stay with him." Her emotions tangled. Loyalty to Oliver, gratitude to Jared, and the painful awareness that she risked deeper entanglement in Hamilton family drama. Yet Oliver's well-being was paramount. "All right," she finally agreed, voice trembling. "We'll stay, at least until things settle." Relief flashed in Jared's face. "Thank you." Then he cleared his throat, adding in a more formal tone, "I'll have my attorneys draw up something that guarantees your rights. Financial support, living arrangements, however you want to structure it. I just want you to feel secure, too." She swallowed hard. "I appreciate that. I never wanted your money, but I won't deny Oliver deserves stability." A heavy pause lingered, each grappling with the enormity of this new arrangement. Sophie fought a rush of tenderness, recalling how Jared had looked hugging Oliver after the DNA confirmation. This was the man she once loved, still visible beneath the polished billionaire exterior. They were startled by Oliver's happy shout from down the hallway. "Mom! Dad! Look at this!" He barreled in, holding up a picture he'd drawn of a dinosaur family. 2 big dinosaurs and 1 smaller one, all smiling. It was childlike, heartfelt, each dinosaur labeled me, Mom, and Dad. Sophie's breath caught. Jared accepted the drawing with reverent care, a smile trembling at the edges of his mouth. "This is great, buddy," he said, pulling Oliver in for a gentle hug. "I love it." In that moment, Sophie felt the weight of their new family dynamic press gently onto her heart. It was fragile and fraught with uncertainties, but Oliver's simple joy and Jared's clear devotion offered a glimmer of hope that they might become a family in truth, if they could survive the storms gathering just beyond the penthouse walls. Sunlight drenched the penthouse the following morning, reflecting off gleaming surfaces and filling every corner with a deceptive sense of serenity. In truth, Sophie and Jared both woke with knots of anticipation in their stomachs. Today was the meeting with the Lawrences, a gathering that could decide Jared's engagement status and, by extension, shape the future for Sophie and Oliver. Sophie rose early, making sure Oliver was dressed and fed. He chatted happily, still unaware of the day's gravity. Jared had stepped out at dawn for a quick phone call with his crisis PR team, but returned to the penthouse in time to join them for breakfast. Even over pancakes and fruit, an invisible weight pressed on them. Margot, sensitive as always, kept conversation light, but her worried glances revealed she knew tension was thick in the air. By mid-morning, Oliver was absorbed in coloring at the kitchen table, humming to himself. Sophie hovered near the living room windows, gazing down at the bustling city. She knew Jared would soon leave for the Lawrences' estate, where Emma and her father were waiting. She couldn't stop imagining the potential confrontation, the demands Emma might make, the anger her father would unleash. Jared might return with a broken engagement, or try to salvage a union that some believed was too shattered to repair. Jared emerged from his home office, dressed in a sharp gray suit. He found Sophie by the window. Without preamble, he murmured, "I'm heading out soon. I wanted to see if you're okay before I go." She turned, managing a wry smile. "I think I'm more worried about you. Are you sure about what you're going to say?" He exhaled. "I've never been less sure about anything in my life, to be honest. But I know I can't keep straddling 2 worlds. Either Emma understands Oliver comes first, or—" He paused, voice tight. "Or the engagement is over." Sophie's heart twisted in sympathy. She still carried the sting of Emma's harsh words, yet she also recognized the woman's heartbreak. "I'm sorry it's come to this," she offered gently. Jared nodded. "Me too, but some choices can't be undone." He hesitated, taking Sophie's hand for a fleeting moment. "No matter what happens, I'll stand by Oliver and you. I want you to feel safe here." Her cheeks warmed slightly. "Thank you." It felt strange to find solace in Jared's presence, but their bond over Oliver was undeniable. He released her hand and crossed to Oliver, who was busily coloring a new dinosaur scene. "Hey, buddy," Jared said, gently resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I've got to go out for a few hours." Oliver glanced up. "Will you come back for lunch?" Jared mustered a small grin. "It might be a late lunch, but I'll do my best. If not, I'll definitely be here for dinner." Oliver nodded, apparently untroubled, and returned to his art. With one last look at Sophie, a silent exchange of mutual support, Jared left the penthouse, accompanied by his security detail. The hours that followed felt interminable. Sophie tried to distract Oliver with board games in the living room. She read him a new picture book Margot had picked up. She even managed to do a bit of online job searching, her old insecurities about finances nagging at her. But Jared's absence loomed, and her mind strayed to the possibility that by day's end, everything might blow up further. By early afternoon, the tension was too much to bear quietly. She was tidying the remnants of Oliver's lunch when the elevator chimed. Jared's low, tense voice reached her ears even before the doors slid open fully. Sophie ushered Oliver into his bedroom, urging him to play quietly, then headed toward the foyer. Jared stepped out, shoulders rigid. He was alone, no father or lawyers in sight. His tie was loosened, and frustration etched lines into his brow. Emma trailed behind him, apparently having come in the same car. She wore a dark, elegant dress, her expression unreadable. Sophie's pulse skittered. "How did it go?" Sophie ventured. "Is everything?" Jared let out a harsh laugh, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure everything's fine could ever describe that meeting." He gestured to the living area. "Let's talk?" Emma nodded stiffly, refusing to meet Sophie's eyes. The three of them moved to the couch, an odd triangle of uncertain alliances. Sophie folded her hands in her lap, preparing for the worst. Jared leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees. Emma and her father proposed conditions, some kind of arrangement to maintain the engagement. Essentially, they want me to keep Oliver out of the public eye, issue a statement labeling the situation a misunderstanding, and proceed with the wedding next month as planned. Sophie's chest tightened. "That means ignoring Oliver's presence in your life?" Emma bristled. "It does not mean ignoring him, but it means no official announcements claiming him as your heir, no grand welcomes into the Hamilton fold. People will assume he's—" She faltered, lips tightening. "They'll assume he's a child from a past affair, but you'd keep it discreet. Jared can see him privately, but not publicly." Sophie's anger flared. "So you want him hidden away? Like some secret Jared visits in the shadows, while you two go on with your glitzy wedding?" Emma gave her a wounded glare. "That's not fair. I'm just trying to keep the damage minimal. You don't understand the stakes here. The business deals, the philanthropic commitments, my father's entire blueprint for—" Jared cut in, voice strained. "Enough, Emma. Oliver is my son, not a puzzle piece to be rearranged at will. I won't relegate him to secrecy so we can dress up and say I do in front of high society. That's not who I am." Emma's eyes glistened. "But Jared, this changes my life too. I never signed up to be a stepmother, especially not to a child I learned about at my own engagement party, humiliated in front of half the city." Sophie inhaled slowly, struggling to maintain calm. She recognized Emma's pain, but Oliver's well-being overshadowed everything. Before she could speak, Jared gently clasped Emma's hand. "I understand how blindsided you feel, but if you love me, you need to accept Oliver openly. I've tried compromising in smaller ways, but this is a line I won't cross." Emma let out a shaky breath, glancing at Sophie. For the first time, her gaze lacked the earlier hostility. "If you were in my shoes," she asked in a trembling voice, "wouldn't you feel overshadowed by all this?" One day we're planning our wedding. The next day your fiancé has a family with someone else. Sophie mustered empathy. I probably would feel overshadowed, and I'm sorry you were hurt by the way this all came out. But Oliver isn't at fault. Neither is Jared, honestly. I'm not sure any of us intended this mess. A hush fell. Emma withdrew her hand from Jared's, as though the weight of the conversation was physically exhausting. She rubbed her temples. So, that's it then? You'll publicly legitimize Oliver as a Hamilton? The engagement changes forever if it doesn't end out right. My father says he's willing to salvage the wedding if you follow his plan, but you refuse. Jared inclined his head. I do. If that means we call off the wedding, so be it. Emma swallowed hard, tears slipping free. I can't marry a man who chooses to blow up every plan we had, even if it's for a moral reason. My father invested so much in this union. Our families had so many philanthropic and corporate projects lined up, and we had a vision for our future. Her voice cracked. I don't want to be the villain here. Jared reached for her hand again, but she pulled away. He looked devastated. You're not a villain, Emma, he said softly. We just have fundamentally different stances now. If you can't stand beside me with Oliver, then you're free to walk. I won't blame you. She bowed her head, allowing the tears to fall silently. Sophie watched, heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She understood the gravity of this moment. Emma loved Jared, likely had dreamed of a life with him. But Oliver's sudden appearance changed the entire path. Sophie also recalled her own heartbreak from years past, carrying Oliver alone. It was as though heartbreak circled them all, each person forced to relinquish some cherished dream. Finally, Emma spoke. I've decided, she said, voice raw. I'm calling off the wedding. My father will handle the formal announcements. Jared, I don't hate you, but it's too much. I can't see a version of my life where I'm not resentful, especially if your son is always right there, reminding me that my place was an afterthought, or that my wedding day was overshadowed by a scandal. Jared sagged, pain flickering across his features. He nodded, acceptance tightening his throat. I wish it wasn't like this, but I respect your choice. Emma rose, casting a glance around the penthouse. I'll send someone for my belongings. Her gaze flicked to Sophie. I hope you realize the scale of what you've cost him, what you've cost me, but I also hope you two build something good for that little boy. Sophie pressed her lips together, uncertain how to respond. She saw Emma struggling to maintain composure, tears streaking her mascara. She simply said, I'm sorry. A bitter, broken laugh escaped Emma. So am I, more than you know. Then she exited toward the elevator, spine rigid, heartbreak trailing behind her like a cloak. Jared stared after her, a statue of regret. Sophie took a hesitant step forward, wanting to comfort him but unsure of her place. Jared, He shook his head, cutting her off. It had to happen, one way or another. His voice came out thick with emotion. I just ended a relationship I thought would be for life, but I can't pretend it's all the fault of Oliver's arrival. Emma and I, maybe we were always a business alliance more than a love story. He turned, looking at Sophie with an intensity that made her chest tighten. I only hope this means I can devote myself fully to Oliver now, he whispered. But everything else feels up in the air. Sophie gently placed her hand on his arm. I'm so sorry you're hurting. I know how it feels to lose something you thought was certain. He closed his eyes for a moment, swallowing. I'll be okay. Just let me deal with the fallout, the media circus. I want you and Oliver safe from the fray. Opening his eyes, he added, Emma will go public soon with the news that our engagement is off. It'll be brutal, but we'll handle it. Sophie's mind whirled. The child who arrived unexpectedly, dismantling a billionaire's engagement. The social ramifications for Jared's empire. The meltdown the press would relish. Yet she also saw the fragile new beginnings. A father's love for his son, a chance to finally give Oliver the family he'd yearned for. She exhaled, stepping back to allow Jared space to breathe. "We'll figure it out," she said quietly, echoing words they'd shared before. "And however this shakes out, Oliver will have both of us, fighting for him." Jared's gaze softened with gratitude. "Yes, he will." In another part of the penthouse, Oliver played with his dinosaur plush, humming an off-key melody, blissfully unaware of the heartbreak that had just unraveled in the living room. Sophie and Jared stood there, each grappling with private turmoil, yet bound by their shared devotion to a little boy who just wanted a family. Outside, the city pulsed on, headlines waiting to be written about yet another Hamilton scandal. But inside, in the hush of that airy space, they were simply three lives searching for a way to fit together, hoping, against all odds, that love could salvage what ambition and secrecy had nearly destroyed. A few days passed in a whirl of press releases and emotional upheaval. True to Emma's word, her father swiftly announced that the engagement with Jared Hamilton was cancelled due to irreconcilable personal matters. Tabloids, celebrity gossip blogs, and even financial news outlets all seized upon the story, headlines splashed with sensational phrases: "Hamilton's secret child shatters wedding plans," "Billionaire love triangle exposed," and "Emma Lawrence breaks ties amid scandal." Sophie, watching from within the penthouse, felt her heart twist each time the television flashed with images of Jared or Emma, accompanied by reporters speculating about the mystery woman and the child at the center of it all. She couldn't protect Oliver from every mention, but mercifully he seemed more interested in his new stuffed dinosaurs and the cartoon channel than the news. Jared had arranged for additional security around the building, ensuring that paparazzi couldn't ambush them in the lobby or on the street. Through it all, Jared was steadfast. Each morning, he joined Oliver for breakfast if his schedule allowed, ruffling the boy's hair and listening earnestly to stories about dinosaur adventures or half-remembered dreams. Then he spent hours at Hamilton Holdings, facing board members, calming investors, and, by his own admission, sometimes arguing with Walter Hamilton over public relations. By evening, he would return, tension lining his face but a quiet determination in his eyes as soon as Oliver greeted him with an excited shout of, "Dad!" Sophie remained cautious. She was enormously grateful for Jared's presence, especially the gentle way he tried to involve her in decisions about Oliver's schooling, medical checkups, or even potential extracurriculars. Yet she couldn't help noticing the toll it was taking on him. Losing Emma, fracturing the alliance with the Lawrences, defying Walter's preference for secrecy, and bracing for potential business fallout. The man who once held a perfect public image now shouldered scorn from some corners of high society. All for a child he'd discovered mere weeks ago. Midweek, Jared brought in a specialized family attorney who sat down with Sophie in the penthouse's smaller study. Papers were spread across the polished desk, preliminary custody agreements, details about child support, discussions about possible living arrangements. Sophie's chest tightened at the cold formality of it all. She despised the idea that her relationship with Oliver's father was filtered through legal language. But Jared insisted on being present, sitting beside her as the attorney calmly explained each clause. Shared custody, with primary residence here in New York if Ms. Carter chooses. Or you could choose a different city, but Mr. Hamilton would have liberal visitation rights. He's prepared to cover all educational and health care costs, plus a monthly stipend for living expenses, whether or not you stay under his roof. And, of course, everything remains flexible if you both agree to changes. Sophie tried not to bristle. "I'm not used to having everything spelled out like a contract," she admitted quietly. "Oliver and we managed on our own, but I want him to have stability now." Jared rested a reassuring hand on hers. "This is just to protect your rights too, Sophie. If, for any reason, my father tries something or I ever become unavailable, Oliver's care is secure. No more risk of you being left adrift." His words carried genuine concern. Sophie exhaled, nodding. "All right," she conceded. We'll work through the details. She tapped a page about schooling. I'm not sure if I want him in some elite private academy or a big Manhattan school. He's only 6. I don't want him lost in formality. Jared nodded thoughtfully. Maybe we can look into smaller private schools, something that fosters creativity. We can visit a few. His eyes brightened a fraction as he spoke of Oliver's future, as though this mundane task, discussing schools, brought a sense of grounded hope to his tumultuous life. Soon the attorney gathered his papers, promising to finalize a draft for them to review together. Sophie walked him to the elevator, her mind buzzing with conflicting thoughts. When she returned to the study, Jared was still there, leaning on the desk, tension etched between his eyebrows. She approached quietly. You all right? He straightened, a wry smile tugging at his lips. I'm fine, it's been a while since I felt this out of my depth. Negotiating billion-dollar deals is second nature to me, but discussing a kid's schooling, planning day-to-day life with you, that's new territory. Her heart softened. You're handling it better than you think. She hesitated, then added in a whisper, It means a lot that you care this much. Jared's expression gentled. Sophie, I've missed out on 6 years of Oliver's life. I can't rewind time, but I'm determined to make the next 6 and all the years beyond count. A wave of emotion threatened to overwhelm her. She quickly averted her gaze, trying to compose herself. Well, if you keep it up, I think Oliver will always remember this as the time his dad found him and never let go. Jared inhaled as though trying to steady his own emotions. I hope so. After a pause, he ventured, Would you like to see my office sometime? Maybe bring Oliver? Show him where I work? How the city looks from those windows? She considered it, picturing Oliver's delight at riding another skyscraper elevator, seeing Jared's desk. Yes, she said gently. I think he'd love that. Jared smiled, and for an instant, a warm hush settled between them. Sophie felt her chest constrict at how naturally they seemed to slip into co-parenting, how easily she could imagine them existing as a real family. But she reminded herself that Jared's world was complicated. They were united by Oliver, but that didn't erase the years of distance, the heartbreak, or the uncertain future they both faced. Just then, Oliver's voice echoed from the living area. Mom? Dad? Look at this show. They exchanged a small smile, drifting out to join him, the conversation of formal agreements left behind for the moment. Later that evening, after Oliver had fallen asleep, Sophie received a text message that made her heart skip. It was from Emma. Surprised, she read the short lines. Sophie, I'd like to meet. Alone. There are things we need to say to each other. Sophie stared at the phone, a flurry of anxiety coursing through her. Emma had been silent since calling off the wedding. Why now? Did she intend to hurl more accusations, or was this an attempt to find closure? Sophie wasn't sure, but a part of her believed that if Emma needed to speak, it was only fair to hear her out. She found Jared in the den going through emails on his tablet. Swallowing, she showed him the text. She wants to talk. Alone. What do you think? Jared's eyebrows rose. He frowned. That's unexpected. Do you feel safe meeting her? I can't predict how she's coping. Sophie considered. She's hurt, but I don't think she means me harm. I have to believe she just wants to clear the air. Jared set aside his tablet, leaning forward. If you want to meet her, I'll respect that. But be careful. The Lawrences are still furious about how the engagement ended. Emma might be caught in their pressure. Sophie nodded, heart thudding. I'll be cautious. I'll pick a public place, maybe a quiet corner of a cafe or even a hotel lobby, so it's neutral ground. Jared gently squeezed her hand. Keep your phone on. Let me know if anything feels off. She managed a faint smile. Thanks. The next morning, Sophie arranged a brief outing with Emma by text. They settled on the lounge of a boutique hotel in Midtown, a discreet spot known for its cozy corners. Jard insisted a security detail follow at a distance, just in case. Sophie didn't argue. She'd rather be safe than risk an ambush by paparazzi. She left Oliver in Jared's care at the penthouse, promising to return soon. Walking into the lounge, Sophie's heart pounded. Emma sat at a small table near the back, wearing a sleek black turtleneck and tailored pants. She looked regal yet subdued. A half-finished cappuccino rested in front of her. Sophie approached cautiously. Emma glanced up, offering a reserved nod. "Thank you for coming." Sophie settled across from her, clasping her hands in her lap. "You asked, and I wanted to hear what you had to say." Emma let out a slow breath. "I suppose I should start by apologizing for how harsh I was before. I was angry, humiliated. It's still not easy to face, but I realize some of my words may have gone too far." Sophie shifted in her seat, replying gently, "I understand your anger. It must have been a terrible shock." Emma's gaze dropped to her cappuccino. "It was, but more than that, I keep replaying what everyone's been saying about the reasons behind our breakup. The tabloids paint me as a scorned fiancé or a social climber who couldn't handle a stepchild. The truth is, complicated." Sophie nodded. "I get that. I've been called worse by the media. Oliver's only a child, but people assume all sorts of motives." Emma's lips pressed thin. "I don't hate your son. I hope you know that. My resentment was never about him personally. It was about how Jared's entire life plan, our plan, shifted overnight, and suddenly I felt like a side note." She paused, blinking back tears. "Do you have any idea how that feels?" Sophie inhaled. "I think so. I felt that way when Jared left 4 years ago, not realizing I was pregnant. Different context, I know, but the sense of being discarded is painful." Emma studied her quietly. "Yes, we each have our own heartbreak." They sipped their drinks in a contemplative silence. Sophie decided to be honest. "I never wanted to ruin your wedding. I didn't even know about it until that night when I got the mistaken invitation. I was trying to let Oliver see his father, not blow up your engagement." Emma gave a soft, mirthless chuckle. "Fate has a cruel sense of timing, or maybe it's exactly as it needed to be. Jared and we were so focused on the business merger aspect of our union, we never asked if we truly wanted each other outside of that context." She sighed. "But it still hurts to lose something I thought was certain." Sophie reached out tentatively. "I'm sorry you had to. I know Jared cares about you in his own way. He's been torn up over how this ended." Emma's eyes glinted with old sorrow. "Yes, well, maybe it's better for both of us that we found out now rather than after a loveless marriage. My father is livid, but I'll survive the scandal. I've survived bigger hits. And Jared, he's free to be a father. Perhaps he was always destined for that role more than the society husband one." Sophie felt a twinge of relief that Emma seemed calmer, more resigned than vengeful. She mustered the courage to ask, "What did you want from me in all this?" Emma set her cup down, voice quiet. "Closure, I suppose, and maybe to say, I don't wish you or Oliver harm. If Jared has chosen you two over me, I won't pretend I like it, but I won't sabotage it. You should have a chance to form a real family with him, assuming that's what you both want." Heat rose in Sophie's cheeks. It's not like that between Jared and me. We're just co-parenting. He lost you because he chose Oliver, not because he and I— Emma waved a hand. "Don't worry, I'm not accusing you of seducing him. But I see the way he looks at you, at Oliver. He's found a new purpose that I couldn't give him." She managed a wan smile. "I won't stand in the way." Sophie's heart hammered. She didn't trust herself to dissect the meaning behind Emma's observation. Instead, she nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Emma reached into her purse, retrieving a business card. She slid it across the table. "My father wants nothing to do with you or Jared anymore, but I believe in courtesy, if not friendship. If you ever need help, like a discreet event or some PR advice. I have contacts. The city can be cruel to single mothers, especially if your name is tangled with the Hamiltons. Sophie stared at the card, deeply touched by this unexpected gesture. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's more kindness than I expected." Emma's lips curved in a faint smile. "I guess heartbreak teaches us compassion, ironically. Just take care of him. If Jared's risking so much for Oliver, he might need someone who stands by him, even if it's not me." Sophie folded the card, tucking it into her bag. "I'll do my best." With that, Emma stood, pulling on her coat. Sophie rose as well, uncertain if they should exchange a handshake or some awkward hug. Emma simply nodded, eyes glistening with unspoken emotions. "Goodbye, Sophie, and good luck." Sophie watched as Emma strode away, posture poised despite the heartbreak that must still ache in her chest. The encounter left Sophie's own emotions in a swirl: sympathy for Emma's loss, gratitude for her surprising grace, and a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, all of them could move forward without further destruction. As she left the hotel lounge, Sophie felt the watchful presence of Jared's security nearby, but she paid it little mind. She stepped into the crisp air, allowing the noise of the city to wash over her. One chapter was closing, a chapter of heartbreak and scandal, while a new one hovered on the horizon. Whether it led to a real family with Jared or simply a peaceful co-parenting arrangement, Sophie braced herself to meet it with a resolve as strong as the city's steel foundations. Spring sunshine painted the city in warm gold as Sophie stood on the wraparound terrace of Jared's penthouse, gazing out over the endless skyline. Months had passed since Emma had ended the engagement. In that time, life for Oliver, and for Sophie, had settled into a new routine, one that was still surreal but carried fewer of the anxieties that once haunted them. With Walter Hamilton's grudging acceptance and Emma's quiet exit from the public stage, the media storm began to fade. A few determined paparazzi lurked at first, snapping shots of Jared picking Oliver up from a children's center or glimpsing Sophie with Hamilton security in tow. But soon enough, another scandal took over the tabloids, and public interest in the billionaire's secret child dimmed. Jared had issued a calm, measured statement confirming Oliver as his son and requesting privacy while his family adapted. Remarkably, the city seemed to move on. Inside the penthouse, everything was unusually peaceful. Oliver now attended a small private school that valued creativity as much as academics, just as Sophie had hoped. The tuition, uniforms, and related fees were all handled by Jared's financial department, yet the father's presence was personal and real. He helped Oliver with reading assignments, joined in weekend field trips, and listened with pride as Oliver described new friends. Every day was a fresh reminder of how far they'd come from the single-room motels and uncertain phone calls that once dominated Sophie's life. Today was special, a school open house where parents were invited to see the children's projects. Sophie had awakened with nervous energy, uncertain if Jared's busy schedule would allow him to appear, but he'd surprised her by blocking out the entire morning on his calendar. Watching him in the next room, tying the laces on Oliver's tiny dress shoes, Sophie felt warmth blossom in her chest. This version of Jared Hamilton, father first and tycoon second, made her wish she'd known he could be like this back when they were younger. "All set?" Jared asked, stepping onto the terrace. Oliver trotted behind him, sporting a new haircut and a grin. The boy seemed to have sprouted taller in the last few months, exuding a confidence that came from being loved in both word and deed. Sophie turned to them with a smile. "Ready, though I hope the traffic isn't too awful." Jared waved off the concern. "We'll take a driver. Plenty of time. The real question, are we going to see a dinosaur display, or is today about space rockets?" He winked at Oliver, who giggled. "I made a volcano model," Oliver announced. "We used baking soda and vinegar, but the teacher says we can't erupt it indoors." Sophie laughed. Probably for the best. They descended to the underground garage together, sliding into a sleek SUV. The trip to Oliver's school was relaxed. Jared had learned to navigate fatherhood with surprising calm, ignoring any lingering press. Once they arrived, Oliver dashed off to join classmates in a bright classroom lined with artwork and science projects. Sophie and Jared strolled inside, exchanging smiles with other parents. A few recognized Jared, though no one made a scene. A teacher greeted them warmly, praising Oliver's curiosity and kind heart. Sophie felt her eyes prickle with emotion. This was the normalcy she'd fought so hard to give Oliver. Not lavish parties or hush-hush scandal, but a true sense of belonging. Watching Jared kneel beside Oliver's volcano model, asking earnest questions about the lava, filled her with gratitude. At the end of the open house, families filtered out. Oliver raced over, glowing with happiness that both his mom and dad had admired his work. He latched onto Jared's hand, and they walked to the parking lot. The entire morning felt blissfully ordinary, until Jared's phone buzzed. Sophie tensed, worried it might be yet another urgent business matter or family drama. But Jared glanced at the screen and broke into a genuine smile. "It's just Dad," he said, meaning Walter Hamilton. "He wants to know if we'd like to join him for dinner sometime this week." Sophie's eyes widened. Walter had remained polite but distant, never going out of his way to invite them anywhere. "Dinner with us?" Jared nodded. "Apparently so. He's been softening. Maybe seeing the press calm down or watching me stand firm about Oliver changed his perspective. He still has reservations about how it all went down, but perhaps he's open to bridging the gap." Sophie swallowed a surge of nerves. "I suppose that's good news." Oliver hopped in place. "Can I go? I want to show Grandpa my drawings, too." Jared laughed, ruffling Oliver's hair. "We'll see about scheduling it, buddy. If it happens, we'll bring your art. I'm sure he'll be impressed." They returned to the penthouse, Oliver chattering about the day's events and the possibility of dinner with Grandpa Walter. After lunch, the boy settled on the floor with crayons and colored paper, humming to himself. Jared and Sophie gravitated to the living room, an unspoken desire to debrief. "That's quite a shift from your father," Sophie observed, perching on the arm of a chair. Jared nodded, dropping onto the couch. "He's still the same controlling man, but he seems to realize I won't capitulate on Oliver's existence. Maybe he respects that. Or maybe the business tide has changed enough that he sees no advantage in fighting me." His tone was wry, but not bitter. Sophie toyed with a throw pillow. "At least it's a chance for Oliver to know both sides of his family, even if it's not perfect." Jared watched her, quietly thoughtful. "Sophie, about family. I've been thinking." He exhaled. "We've spent these months co-parenting day by day. You've let me be part of Oliver's every moment, even after all those lost years. I can't tell you how much that means to me." She felt her pulse quicken, uncertain what he was leading to. "I'm glad it's worked out so far." He stood, crossing the space until he was in front of her. "But I don't want to just be your roommate or the father who sleeps in the next room while you keep your distance. I know we had our own unresolved feelings from the past, and everything got overshadowed by Emma, by my father. But I still care about you. I want to see if we can build something real. As a couple." Sophie's breath caught. She let the pillow drop and rose to face him. "Jared, are you sure? We've both changed so much." His eyes were warm, steady. "We have. But in many ways, that change makes us better for each other. I see your resilience, your compassion, and I see how you love Oliver, how you do anything for him. I respect that more than I can say." He swallowed. "I don't want to rush you, but I want you to know that I'm open to a future where we're more than co-parents." Sophie's mind spun with memories. The painful day she realized he wasn't coming back. The lonely nights carrying a child he didn't know existed. and the glimmer of hope in their recent bond as parents. She inhaled slowly, feeling tears prick. I care about you too, but I'm scared. Scared that if it goes wrong, Oliver will lose the stability he's just found. Jared's hand rose to gently cup her cheek, his voice trembling with emotion. I won't let that happen. No matter what, I'll never abandon Oliver or you. If we try this, truly try, I promise to fight for us. You have my word. She closed her eyes, allowing the warmth of his touch to wash over her. This was the man she once fell for, now more mature, more grounded by fatherhood. Tentatively, she placed a hand over his. All right, she whispered, voice thick with feeling. Let's take it one step at a time. We can see where this leads. He exhaled in relief. Thank you for giving me a chance. Before either could say more, Oliver peeked around the corner, holding up a new drawing. Mom, Dad, look, it's our family with Grandpa Walter. I gave him big ears. He giggled innocently. Sophie and Jared broke into soft laughter, stepping apart to welcome the boy. He bounded over, thrusting the picture into Jared's hands. It showed 4 stick figures with wide smiles. Me, Mom, Dad, and Grandpa, plus some squiggly lines presumably representing the penthouse. Jared crouched to Oliver's level, ruffling his hair again. This is fantastic, buddy. Think we should give it to Grandpa when we see him? Oliver nodded emphatically. Yes, and then I'll draw one of Grandma if I have a grandma somewhere. Sophie glanced uncertainly at Jared, recalling he'd never spoken much about his mother, who had passed away years ago. But Jared simply smiled, a trace of sadness in his eyes. Grandma's not with us, Oliver, but she'd have loved to meet you. I'll show you pictures sometime. Oliver accepted this with a child's unguarded sincerity, then darted off to gather more crayons. Jared and Sophie straightened, locking eyes. Each recognized the moment's gentle perfection. Oliver, brimming with possibilities, the Hamilton Empire slowly reshaping itself around an unexpected heir, and the two of them courageously opening their hearts to the idea of family. A fresh wave of sunlight poured through the expansive windows, illuminating the living area and the scattered art supplies on the floor. In that golden light, Sophie felt a stirring in her chest. Hope, bright and unwavering. She slipped her hand into Jared's, his fingers laced with hers, warm and sure. Together they watched Oliver scribble away, imagining tomorrow's adventures. The storms of scandal and heartbreak had, at last, receded. In their wake stood something stronger, a bond forged by love, perseverance, and the unwavering devotion to a little boy who was, beyond all doubt, the heart that brought them home. So we come to the end of today's story. If you liked it, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. I'd love to read your comment. Every day we read your beautiful messages, which are the best reward for the effort we make in bringing you these stories. The most gratifying thing for us is knowing that we are your company and especially bringing you reflections that help us all grow as human beings. Finally, I encourage you to subscribe to Narrated Words and activate the bell if you haven't already so you don't miss any of our stories. You can also share them with those you love. We adore being here by your side. Blessings. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.